I'm curious to see how this works. Setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. Done. Redirecting me to YouTube. All right. So we are live officially on YouTube. We're trying out Zoom for the first episode of Trending in Hollywood. So I am Scott Menzel. I am going to be the host, and joining me is Mr. Demetri Panos, who's going to be the co-host.
Hey, welcome. It's so good to be back with you again.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. A little bit of a hot minute. And kind of how this show is going to go is that we are going to have a third person on the show each week, but we figured for a kickoff episode, it's just going to be the two of us. And unlike a lot of these entertainment shows, we're going to combine entertainment news with industry insider information. That's kind of how this show is going to stand out from the other shows that are out there. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the nominations that have come out this week. There's been a ton of them.
There have
been a ton of them. Quite a few. SAG, Golden Globes, of course, our own organization, the HCA, and then, of course, BAFTA did their long list. So we got to talk about those. Demetri pulled up a very interesting article we're going to talk about a little bit later about independent film producers. And that's going to kind of tie into our conversation also about the Sundance Film Festival and what films got purchased and how much and all that conversation. So that's a breakdown of the show. And we're going to start off right now with the SAG nominations. Demetri, what were your overall thoughts on the SAG nominations?
Fine. They seem to be in line. Every nominating party, there is a consistency and then there is an inconsistency. I found that the SAG nominations were, pretty, each one spot on, but SAG was pretty decent. When you look at something like outstanding performance by a cast in motion picture per se, you get The Five Bloods, Ma Rainey, Minari, One Night in Miami, The Trial of the Chicago 7. I believe that is a great sampling of cast, like right in each of those movies to pick from. I don't think that there's any controversy really to pick at. You could always say there's snubs here, snubs there. This is a different year. And I think that each party has done their best to do whatever. So where there's a snub in one, it gets picked up by another. Everything seems to like wash out. Outstanding performance in a male actor, leading role. Riz Ahmed, Chadwick Boseman from Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Anthony Hopkins, Gary Oldman, Stephen Yeun. That's a good sampling right there. Yeah. Other people didn't have, like, say, Stephen Yeun, and people were complaining. So I think overall, for the movies we had this year, a very trying year, I think it's good. SAG, Screen Actors Guild, did a good job in spreading out the love, I felt.
Yeah. I would agree. I think it's kind of fascinating, as always. People seem to always have something to complain about when it comes to nominations.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we always forget that there's only 5 spots, and there's only 10 spots for Best Picture. So you're always going to feel like someone's left out. So right. If you didn't have Stephen Yeun, you would have Delroy Lindo. And then they'll be like, oh my God, why did they leave Stephen out? That's a crime. Maybe you should have left someone else out. Then if Gary Oldman got left out, people would have been like, no, he was so good in Mank. It's crazy. And I think based on the conversation that happens in our little bubble of film Twitter and the film world, I think this is pretty on point. I think because of the fact that they snubbed, if you want to say that. Lindo for actor, he's going to be part of the cast for the Five Bloods above. So like
Right.
they got in. It's only certain people. And I want to really, the one thing that I want to talk about, because there's crossover between this and the Golden Globes, which also people had so much problems with, is Hillbilly Elegy. Now you and I have had conversations about this in the past, about how we feel this is actually a good movie, and
Yes.
we think the performances in the film are good. People seem to be very, very shocked that this movie kind of appeared again when it comes to Golden Globes and SAG, and I don't understand why. Can you explain that to me?
I wish I could. I honestly wish I could. And it's so funny that you bring up Hillbilly Elegy right now, because I was actually looking at outstanding performance by a female actor in a supporting role, in which Glenn Close is nominated for the SAG Awards, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that is not a surprise at all. I believe most of the academies, if not all of the parties, really do have a passion for Glenn Close. She has been around for such a long time, never quite achieved the Meryl Streep status, but she's been around almost equally as long when you think about it, right? And she's been in some fantastic movies. She's not in as many movies today as, say, Meryl Streep, but when she is in a movie, people really take notice. So I'm not surprised she got nominated here. I don't understand the, let's just say the dislike. Hate's a strong word for Hillbilly Elegy. I felt that the movie worked very well. And you mentioned performances. I think they were good all around, from the older Vance to the younger Vance in college, or the kid, the girl, I can't think of her name, who played his girlfriend.
Oh, Haley Bennett.
Haley Bennett. I mean, she was superb. She was great. I wanted her to be my girlfriend. You know, she was.
Oh, you're talking about the girl
girlfriend
from Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah. I forget her name, but in college, you know, she was like so good. And then of course, Amy Adams always puts in a good performance. But of all, Glenn Close stuck out. Now, if you want to talk about surprises, to me, it was like News of the World and Helena Zengel, and then Maria Baklova. She's getting a lot of attention for Borat, and to me, that's a surprise.
Yeah,
because not a lot of people seem to have been talking about Borat, but she had great publicity behind her, because she got the more notice, I think, from even Borat. Which is good for her, and good for Sacha Baron Cohen. Yeah, I'm sure he supported it. He's like, no ego about it. Yeah, go ahead. I think this is great.
Well, he's the one that kind of pushed her out there. That was the interesting thing with it. And that's, to me, the weird thing about it, because in the industry, it's fascinating when a certain celebrity comes out and is like, oh, I think this person should be in the conversation. And then all of a sudden you're like, every single group, she's in there. Every single bigger thing, she's in there. And I'm like kind of looking at it. And I'm going to be honest, like, I thought the movie was fine. I think it overstays its welcome. I think it's a one-trick pony. But, you know, when you look at this and you kind of have a conversation of whether she should be in the nominations versus someone like Glenn Close, to me, it's a no-brainer. Like, it's kind of like Glenn Close should be there. I'm not too sure about this other person. But it's very, very strange. It's very, very strange.
But it's not, because had this been a normal year, you know, sans COVID, it would have never, I don't believe it would have ever happened.
Yeah.
Because we would have had so many more movies to choose from. So and this is no offense to her. So anybody who's a fan of Maria, I mean, I don't mean it in like in an insulting way. I'm just saying our picks were limited. They really got cut down because so many movies just pulled out a release.
Yeah.
to move into next year. So, but you look at even outstanding performance by a male actor in a supporting role. You and I talked about this. I think it's worth talking about because another name that pops up in various other academies, Jared Leto.
Yes.
And that too has gotten a lot of, not to say controversy, but people are questioning it. Like, why?
Yeah.
And I think it falls under the same category. We have a limited amount of movies, in a sense, to choose from. His performance, you can't deny that his performance is very good. And he's kind of stumping. Some people didn't like the movie. I was one that actually did. In part, I even said in my review, a lot of people are going to be pointing at his performance. I don't get why there's hate on that. So
I don't either. I mean, in all fairness, I mean, I liked that movie too. We talked about that. I don't think it's an awards movie. I will put that, and I think there's some separation that has happened this year because of what you said, that there's this weird awards season going on, and we shouldn't discount it because there's been a lot of inclusivity happening and things like that, and I'm very appreciative of it. But I do think there's a lot of strange like nominations mixed in with those. So like another one that's kind of like weird to me is Sacha Baron Cohen for the Trial of Chicago 7. Like when you talk, like people are always like ready to, Jared Leto, because they look at that movie and they say it's not an awards movie. So they say Trial of Chicago 7, that's an awards movie. But then when you think about someone like a Paul Raci, Paul Raci from Sound of Metal, who has been like kind of building steam, and then you see him absent, I think the first thing to do is like, oh, Jared Leto over him. But I'm also like, Sacha Baron Cohen over him? Like, really? Like, I think you can kind of look at things multiple ways. I think people, they take that one person who they're not used to seeing so much, and they're like, oh, what are you doing in here?
Right. But they're somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They get the love somewhere else. And I think because it's a COVID act of contrition, we've gotten less movies, because when you look at the pattern is there's the same movies. So you're going to see The Five Bloods, Trial of the Chicago 7, Mank, One Night in Miami, The Father, Minari. These movies are popping up in all the various other nominations, but they're being given different kinds of TLC.
Yeah.
So it's how we opened. So yeah, he's not in this one, but he's in another awards nomination. But you bring up a good point, because if you're complaining about Jared Leto, why aren't you complaining about Sacha Baron Cohen, like getting picked over this guy? Because I think that Raci was fantastic in Sound of. He was really a bright spot in that movie for someone, and I loved it because and again, no offense, he was unrecognizable. He's not like a big star, and yet he still had the presence and charisma in that movie to shine. He's great.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to jump over. We talked a little bit about the SAG. I want to go over to Golden Globes a little bit. Mm-hmm. So this one, obviously, people freaking going ape shit this week about this. And again, not pointing out some of the things that I think a lot of people wanted to see, but focusing on the negative, which is something that I think we do a lot, especially over the last year or two. I feel like we focus very heavily on the negative instead of focusing on the positive. And to me, one of the bright spots in here, and when I'm talking about best motion picture, musical, or comedy, the fact that Hamilton got put in here, because to me, based on the fact that that's not actually a movie adaptation or a film adaptation, it's literally a tape recording of the stage production. I'm shocked that it's in there, but I'm happy for it, because I think we also talked about this in the past. Lin-Manuel Miranda has kind of redefined the musical genre, and he has brought it for a whole new audience. So I'm happy that his film, this film adaptation or whatever, the stage to screen version of it is there. But I think people are just too busy focusing on, oh, why is that music movie there? because like,
Right.
hey, we don't like Sia now because of the fact that she didn't cast a autistic person in the lead
Right.
role, even though most people have not seen the movie. So
Right.
judging a book by its cover, it's a little unfair. But yeah, I mean that's something. I mean, everyone, that's all it was. Like, oh my god, how did not include that? How's that in there? How's that in there? But again, completely missing the fact that Hamilton was included in there, and the prom and Palm Springs. It's like, you look at each category and kind of go, maybe there's an outcast there, an outlier, but you kind of like, for the most part, it's not bad.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Hamilton at all, too, because from a technical standpoint, if you want to talk about Hamilton, like how they brought that from stage to screen, they literally broadcast back, and they filmed in that theater, and they set up like the scenes and set up the cameras, but with no audience, and there's a lot of that footage in this Hamilton movie, and you can't tell. Um, and to me, that's brilliant. That the cast literally came back from what other gigs they may have been doing to film these specific scenes, and they don't necessarily tell you, but you can kind of tell, from overhead camera shots, because they had to do this, but there's no audience, and you go, huh, I would have never guessed, because I'm so involved in this. And I think I like that it got that credit. I was also, listen, I was pleasantly surprised by the prom, and I enjoyed it. So it was nice to see it get some love, because that is more of a traditional musical outside of Hamilton to me. So I was fine with I was fine with the prom being in there.
Yeah, and I also, speaking of the prom, I want to bring this up because it's been like everybody says it. So, you know, one of the things, and I understand now, I've even more so than ever before. There's a reason why I like watching movies prior to anyone else seeing them and being one of the first. And it's not really an ego thing for me. It's something of, I hate the noise that is created after a movie comes out. So I watched the prom early. I got to see it because I hounded Netflix, and I was like, I love this musical. I want to see it. And I really, really loved it. And, a couple people started hammering on James Corden. Initially it was kind of like very positive. Then a couple people came out, started hammering on him. And then there's became this flux of conversation where everyone just hates James Corden now. Oh, this guy's terrible. What is he doing? Worst actor. He doesn't fit the part. Yada, yada. And as someone who has actually seen the stage play, James Corden, besides the fact that he's not gay in real life, looks the part and fits the part based on what the character was on the stage.
Sure.
And people are forgetting this. I saw conversations where someone's like, they should have put Dan Levy in the role. No, Dan Levy's not like 50. He doesn't fit. That's not how it works. You literally, like, if you're having an adaptation, you look at what the stage looks like and you kind of say, who's the best fit for this? And whether people agree with it or not, and I can understand some people saying like, yes, you should get a gay actor to play that character. I mean, that's a problem that is a much larger discussion that I don't want to have today. But, I think people are just jumping on him and like attacking him, when if you look at the actual stage play and you look at the movie, you can see why it works. And it works well.
Right.
But people don't want to admit that because for some reason we all hate James Corden now.
Right. Well, a couple of things. Number one, I only saw the movie because of your high recommend.
Yeah.
You're like, you got to see this. It wasn't high on my bucket list of pandemic movies to watch.
Yeah.
To be honest. And to me, the trailer looked like just it's like the geriatric High School Musical. Then I did watch it, and I was very pleasantly surprised, and I was happy that I did, because it was very different from a lot of what I'd already seen, which was just depressing the hell out of me. And this, is light and airy, and I appreciated its messages. And, when you're talking about Dan Levy, James Corden, who knows who, right? Mass audiences. We forget that sometimes they make these movies for a broader audience. So they're packaging the casting so that people recognize who's in the movie to try to get more viewership. This has been going on since the day of cinema. So whereas James Corden to me was like fine, I could point to other performances that I really enjoyed, but I thought the movie, like, it's one of the highlights that I saw because it was just different, and James Corden's good, and I'm glad to see it get some love, because I think it was deserving, for what it was and for what it accomplished. And again, this year especially, I'm glad that some movies are getting picked because they're different from all the rest.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a good way. I mean, it's kind of how I feel about something like Palm Springs. I think in a normal year, a Palm Springs would not even be remotely in a conversation. And I'm not saying that to be mean about Palm Springs. I love Palm Springs. But the bottom line is, it's the change of programming, right? There's a lot of like real world type movies coming out, movies about outsiders feeling left out, movies about racial injustice. It's a lot of heavy subject matter, and we're watching so many of these movies. And when you
during
see
a pandemic,
or what?
During a pandemic, when we're locked inside a house, not already scared of what the hell is going to happen next, and it's like you get hit over the head. So when a movie, so
it just feels like a breath of fresh air. You're like, oh, something light, something fun. And again, like, Palm Springs, less so than the Prom. At least Prom has like elements of inclusivity within it.
Sure.
And then also like a really good takeaway message. Like, I understand it's, candy coated and whatnot, but that's what Broadway musicals are. Like, if you've seen traditional Broadway musicals, they're not like deep and heavy. They're literally like, they have a nice uplifting message. Kinky Boots on Broadway is not deep. It's literally like just celebrating culture. But it's sort of crazy. And I love the fact, and again, another thing that people are not talking about is the fact that Dev Patel got in for David Copperfield, a movie that I feel like has been so overlooked, and he's so wonderful in that movie.
He is. But, I want to go back to, we were talking about Palm Springs, right?
Yeah.
Yes. In a normal year, I agree with you. I don't believe we'd be talking about it as an awards getter. However, in a normal year, I do believe that we would have been talking about it as a decent, crowd pleasing indie film that would play at landmarks and perhaps opening up at like some AMC theaters like Century City. Forgive me who's watching being LA centric, but I think the movie would have done okay. Like, I'm not saying $100 million, but I think people would have gravitated towards it because it really is a good romantic comedy with a twist, and it's kind of original, and at the same time it's funny. It was entertaining, and it kind of reminded me of Safety Not Guaranteed.
Oh yeah,
that little indie, right? That little indie winner that people went to that helped fuel box office. But being that we're in COVID contrition of movies, we talk about Palm Springs. I don't have a problem with it this year at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can also argue that same thing for a movie like On the Rocks is like that too, where, for Sofia Coppola, we know her, she became a household name because of Lost in Translation, which of course, very, personal. I feel like that movie was so great for Bill Murray. I feel like Bill Murray really related to that character, and still arguably to this day the best performance Scarlett Johansson has ever given. and the two of them together are just magic. And seeing Bill Murray with Rashida Jones is a nice pairing. I thought they were delightful together. And
Me
again,
too.
it makes you smile. It's light. It's airy. It's fun. But again, in normal years, this would be like an afterthought. That would be that feel good crowd pleaser movie that we wouldn't even be considering for most of these categories, unfortunately.
I
And I think
don't
there's something
disagree.
to say this year, especially, that a lot of these movies are kind of getting the mix in. They're getting mixed in
Right.
because, like you pointed out so eloquently, is that it's a
Thank you.
change of pace.
Yeah.
I need that. I need, after I watch Judas and the Black Messiah and The Five Bloods and Ma Rainey and all this stuff,
Yeah.
I need to watch a prom.
Pieces
I
of
need to
Woman.
watch
Yeah.
Palm Springs.
Yeah, The Father. I mean, all of these movies are good movies in their own right, but God, like when they're one after another, I just like I want to go bed. And so, yeah, when I watch On the Rocks, I had said this in my review too. It really makes me miss the movie going experience because that too would have been that kind of a movie that would have grown. Again, these movies don't have to be franchise $100 million flicks, but they add to the collective. They add to the box office. They add to the machine. They're original. They're effective. They're entertaining. And we like perhaps Bill Murray and Rashida Jones, because it's on the big screen, perhaps they would have even gotten more accolades and notice. I find that this year, a lot of these movies just end up getting lost, literally in a stream of streaming. There's so many movies that unfortunately it's kind of hard to remember a movie that you saw in March or April. So I am happy that Bill Murray got a little bit of love. I thought he was, he always shows us why we love him, and he works so well with Coppola. And to what you had said about him working with Rashida Jones, it was that breezy movie that had a little bit of heft to it. It was really good. But any other year, we might not be talking about it awards season, but I still think box office wise, people would have gone to go see it. They would have sought it. They would have found it. So I'm sad about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that too. I think what we'll do is we won't talk about BAFTA this week because of the fact that they just did the long list and people. The big takeaway from the long list is that they excluded Spike Lee, and everyone's upset about Spike Lee not
Right.
getting on the long list. That's and we all have opinions about it. Some people are really really pissed off about it. I kind of am indifferent towards it, just because of the way that I feel about the Five Bloods in comparison to some of his other work. I don't feel as strong. Um, but that's really the only takeaway from that right now. I do want to
Sure.
talk just real briefly before we jump into Sundance and the independent producers thing. We want to go over like some of our nominations, and I want to say that what I love the most about this organization and the people within it is that every year I feel like there's this push for diversity, inclusivity within nominations, and there's always in the conversation. And I get it that we're not Golden Globe level. I get that we're not these Critics' Choice level. I get that we're not this high level yet. We're slowly climbing the ranks. It's going to take some time to get noticed and get buzz behind a lot of things that we do. But I will say one of the things that I'm thankful for within our membership group, and it's because it's important to have a diverse membership group, is that that's reflective in your nominations. And the nominations, if you never noticed, there's very little very little like backlash towards our nominations on Twitter and social, because we put them out on social, and like even though it doesn't get picked up by a lot of the trades, social goes crazy, it goes nuts. And there's very little like, oh my God, you didn't nominate this person. Oh my God, you didn't nominate this. Not like it is with the major ones. And I think that says something about the membership group, because we try to vote for a well-rounded group of nominees.
Yep.
For us, Demetri, was there anyone that stood out that you were kind of like, wow, I'm surprised this is on there?
No, here I am surprised at how well. Look. Let's look at Best Picture for a second, right?
Yeah.
Soul made Best Picture, right? It's up, not just animated, but Best Picture.
Yep.
I don't believe it made Best Picture in any other nominating category, Academy category for Best Picture, not animated picture,
right?
That I can think of.
There was one for, it did get, I think it was either National Board of Review or one other one, like where it was on there.
Who's they? Who are they? Who are they compared to us? Who are they? Who are they? NBR. No, I no offense, NBR, I'm joking. But when you look at all the other, the ones that we talked about, Golden Globes, SAG, even BAFTA, what ours is really well rounded.
Yeah,
very much. And I do believe it's because of our voting body. We are a diverse set of people, not just ethnicity but by age as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's really well rounded that way. So I love seeing things like, so yes, we see Riz Ahmed, Anthony Hopkins, Delroy Lindo, King Bensley Adair for Best Actor, Chadwick Boseman, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. So that's consistent with everybody else, and you can't say that anybody was really snubbed. You look at even Best Actress, Frances McDormand, Nomadland, Vanessa Kirby, of course, Viola Davis, Zendaya, who didn't get nominated in a lot of other things. She's in ours. Which is fine, no problem. Carey Mulligan, of course. When you look at Hollywood Critics Association, HCA, I really think that people should take note. So Deadline, you should be posting this. All the trades, it should be posted, and it should be noted how really spread out and diverse it really is, and that it's a proof positive thing that HCA really truly does love movies and performance, and you can see it in our nominations, because we're not just going by rote. Oh, what did the other ones do? There's really good spreading out of the love, and that's what I appreciate probably the most. Look, Bo Burnham, Promising Young Woman for Best Supporting Actor. He was fantastic in that. How many of the other ones had Bo Burnham? None. So it's Daniel Kaluuya is getting a lot, Leslie Odom, and we had Paul Raci, Sound of Metal. That's a good Best Supporting category right there. That is a solid list. And you can't say literally, oh, well, you should have gone with this person. How did this person not get in? I said, no, I say, well done. We did good.
Yeah. I mean, I think for a lot of, the only category that I would criticize within our organization, and again, it stems from a point that we keep hitting on the head over and over again, is the calendar year that we live in, that we've lived in this last year, is the indie film category. So when I see a movie like a Minari in Palm Springs in here, that's where I kind of say, guys, really, like, we couldn't have thought of like 2 more truly independent features. Mm-hmm. And that's would be the only thing that I would say. But most of the movies that have come out in a traditional year, as we have said, are not, a lot of these are not big studio releases. They're movies that are pretty much independent films, even though they are released by studios, whether it's Netflix or Focus or Searchlight. But that was the one category this year where I kind of like looked at it and I was kind of like, wow, we really just kind of went with movies that are already kind of on this list and in this conversation. You know, it was nice to see Miss Juneteenth in there and Black Bear, of course, because I think those were really strong independent films that truly encompass what it is to be an indie film.
Right.
But that being said, I would have loved to see a little bit more indie love on
Well,
our end, but it's been difficult this year.
it's been difficult this year. You and I have had this conversation, and it makes total sense. Again, a lot of the higher end studio pictures were just yanked from release to be put into this year. So we never had the opportunity to watch those movies, to see if any of them would qualify, see if they were that good, right? So when I look at our best picture category and I look at Judas and the Black Messiah, I wouldn't call it an indie movie, but it's not huge like tent pole movie. It would have, I believe it would have gotten some love, but then you look at Minari. Yeah. Minari would have opened up, that's an art house film, as is One Night in Miami. Now, I'm not saying that they, via their word of mouth, that they wouldn't have expanded, but, you know, Sound of Metal, same deal. Promising Young Woman, that one probably would have had the biggest shot of expanding and making a bigger name for itself. But we also included, I go back to Soul. Like, there's no reason, since Beauty and the Beast was nominated for Best Picture, there's no reason why an animated movie can move you as much, if not more so, than a live action movie. And I love the fact that it's there. You know, The Father is a small movie that could have grown from the word of mouth, and people would want to see Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Colman's performance, but it's a heavy movie. So, you know, Trial of the Chicago 7, that was Netflix. That movie was never going to be, that wouldn't make 75 million or 50 million.
That was supposed to be, remember, that one was supposed to be initially released by Paramount. Right. And Paramount wound up selling it to Netflix because instead of trying to push movies out this year, they decided it would be better to sell off some of their stuff.
Sure. But how much do you think that movie would have made had it been released theatrically from Paramount?
Trial of Chicago 7? Not that much. Probably like 50 million.
Yeah, maybe. And it would have gotten noticed for performances. Like, I think the Trial, like a lot of other movies, would have gotten more publicity. People tend to forget that when you open a movie theatrically, and it's a good movie with that kind of a cast, there's more written about it, talked about it on news feeds. You know, you'll see it a lot more from a marketing publicity standpoint. Trial of Chicago 7, it had some pre-release press come out, but once it's out, then it's in the queue on Netflix and it gets lost with every other thing that Netflix puts out.
It's true.
So never underestimate what the power of the movie-going experience and the cinematic view from a marketing standpoint can do to help a movie gain more awareness. Even though it's not $100 million movie, just think of the smaller movies that went on big because of it played at a theater. The Sofia Coppola Lost in Translation, you brought that up earlier. That is a perfect example of that because it was in theaters. So, you know, but we did a good job. I love everything that we had. So, and I actually saw pretty much everything that was in there too. So yay.
It was easier this year, that's for sure. Like when it comes to previous years about like access and actually seeing things, there was very little excuse not to see stuff this year because like everything was readily available. Even the stuff that was kind of like last minute, like they pushed that stuff hardcore last minute.
Right.
So there was really very little like excuse to be like, oh, I didn't get to see that one. It's like, really, like, it's like they only sent a link like 20 freaking times over the last like month and a half.
Yeah. And I say good on them.
Yeah.
Because in this world, that's the best, easiest way to do it. And if people missed it a week ago, well, hey, you can see it this week, or you can see it 2 weeks down the road. That was probably the best part. So, I never feel that I have to see it first. It's just nice to be included sometimes. And like, I don't, if a bunch of people saw it way before me, that's okay. Here's a link. You want to see it? Yeah, I do. Thank you. It's fine. And that's how I love that approach this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I think the studios for the most part did a really good job with most titles.
Yeah.
All right. So switching over to Sundance.
Yeah.
Then this kind of ties into something that you wanted to talk about as well with indie producers, but
Yeah.
I wanted to talk first and foremost about Sundance. And
Yeah.
to me, I applaud the folks over there for trying to do a virtual festival, setting it up like an actual festival where it had a schedule, which you had to follow. I thought that was really great because it made every film feel like you were sitting in a theater in a weird way, because like the reaction came out, you want to get your reaction out right away. So it was very much like being there. That being said, in terms of the programming and the lineup, I think we're going back like 2 or 3 years ago, and I don't remember the exact year, so please forgive me. It was either in 2019 or 2020, the before everything shut down, where there was a lot of conversation out of Sundance about how inaccessible things are. Who are these movies for? And I couldn't help when I was watching a lot of these movies, and some of them were obviously stronger than others with like the right editing and the right studio coming in, they can kind of edit it together and make a good movie. But I would say about 75% of the movies that I watched, I literally like walked away from it being like, who's going to watch this? Who's going to watch this? And I think there's this disconnect that critics have that they don't understand. Like they can appreciate like, oh, the cinematography is so beautiful, or like, I really like the way it was edited, or like the style of it, completely forgetting that an average moviegoer who watches anywhere between like, I don't know, 20 to 30 movies a year, probably tops.
That's being generous.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about in theater. I'm talking about like between theater and like DVD and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. I mean, the average, yeah.
I mean,
makes sense.
In theaters, it's probably like 5 to like 6.
It's about 5 to 10 a year.
So it's pretty low.
And then there's the average moviegoer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when you watch a movies and you're kind of like, you look at it and you kind of say, oh, this is good. This is, this aspect. You kind of have to like look at the film as a whole, and you can appreciate things. And I'm not saying like that's our job, right? We're supposed to appreciate like, oh, look at that cinematographer. This cinematographer really should be well known, or this director, I've never heard of them before. They show so much promise. That's great. We can do that. It's important. That's part of our jobs. But the bottom line is you have to look at the film as a whole and kind of say, all right, who in the real world is going to watch this movie? And that is the problem that I had when I walked away from majority of the movies I watched.
Yeah.
So I just want to name off some titles real quick that got sold. And there wasn't that many.
No.
There was Summer of Soul, which is a documentary that was picked up by Searchlight and Hulu, which they'll do wonders with that because that's their wheelhouse. Netflix purchased Passing, which is the Rebecca Hall directorial debut with Tessa Thompson. It'll probably get lost on Netflix. Playing with Sharks, perfect for Nat Geo. Crypto Zoo was picked up by Magnolia, which means that we'll never hear about it again. No offense, Magnolia, but like people like most of your movies, like people don't hear about them after they get picked up. And then there's, I think it's Ally, something like that. It was picked up by Neon. I didn't actually see that one. And then of course, Jockey was picked up by Sony Pictures Classics, which basically looks like next year's Nomadland. Prisoners of Ghostland was picked up by RLJE Films. It's a Nicolas Cage movie. again, mediocre buzz out of the festival. Some people loved it. Some people didn't like it so much. We all know where that's going to go, straight to VOD. Together. I really kind of enjoy this one. A quirky little like surrogate comedy that is very like adults. Again, Demetri's point earlier about like playing at the Landmark or like the Ritz theaters back in Philly, it would be playing there for like weeks. Right. Mainstream audiences couldn't give two shits about it. Flea, which is the big neon movie, which I think that one's going to actually do some really big buzz for award season next year. And then The Glitch in the Matrix, which is also a Magnolia picture. And of course, I left out one, which I want to talk about. And that, of course, is CODA. Demetri, you had the pleasure of seeing CODA. I did. CODA, and
look, my favorite movie of the year. Like, you know, if there was a loophole to get it in for Academy Awards because it was screened theatrically, yeah, it gets my vote, but it'll get my vote for next year.
Yep.
Again, I always love it when a movie can showcase performances by people I've never seen before, and they win me over. Like, that's the power of movies, and that's the power of a good movie. It's a remake of a French film, which I'd never seen, but there were so many times that this movie could have gone down an obvious route, and it didn't. It always surprised, and it hit every emotional beat and note. I was telling somebody earlier today, the last half hour of that movie, I was crying. I was welling up. It's a feel-good movie. It's not because a person died. Yeah, that's a spoiler. Nobody dies in this movie. It's a great emotional feel-good movie. It sticks out from, I had just watched The Father. I had just watched the Daniel Kaluuya movie. I'd watched these heavy movies. This one comes along and I'm like, yay, life can be good. And the performances were fantastic. Okay, I'm a little biased. It took place in Gloucester, Massachusetts. So the North Shore got some great love. The directors from Boston, Sean, what's her last name? Heater.
Yeah.
And we had a fresh new face, teenage girl. She's the only hearing person in her deaf family. Everyone else is deaf. Marlee Matlin is recognizable. The rest of her family truly deaf. They were all wonderful to watch. And like I said, I was welling up and crying. I was alone, so you can't prove that I actually was. Maybe I'm saying it to show off my emotional side, but what a breath of fresh air. This is a movie that I really wish would have been released theatrically, because to say it's a crowd pleaser it's just that I think it undersells the movie.
Yeah.
So not enough love.
You may get your wish. You may get your wish because Apple has picked it up, and I don't know what they're planning on doing with it, but I'm sure they're going to push it out for next award season. So if, fingers crossed, if things turn out to be a little bit better, we may see some of the smaller fall festivals happen. I don't think a Toronto is going to happen, but maybe a Telluride because it's small and contained.
Mm-hmm.
Not a Toronto because it's too big, too many people coming around the world. That's not going to happen. But smaller ones, you may see a little bit of those happen. And I think we'll see some people returning to the cinema. And I think their studios are going to toe dip. They may toe dip a little bit, but I think you're going to start seeing some screenings happen around September and October.
You loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember your first tweet, and you were just all about that movie for, it seemed like a year already. You really, you sold it good. And I hope, because I always wondered, what was the submarine movie with Tom Hanks?
Oh, Greyhound.
Greyhound was supposed to be released theatrically, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
See, I kind of feel bad for Apple don't get me wrong, not that they're not making money from a theatrical standpoint. They had a slate of movies set to go theatrical. They were going to make their big theatrical splash, no pun intended. And I believe Greyhound was to be the first one.
Yep.
And they had to like put it on their Apple TV, which is fine. I hope I hope Apple pushes that for theatrical later on down the year. Apple has actually kind of released some good movies,
I agree.
think, this year. So now $25 million is what they paid, right? What do you think about that?
I mean, it's a lot, but you and I had this conversation. Maybe we'll let the audience know about it, is that you have to look at streamers' point of view and logic. So we had a conversation about Netflix and how a season of The Crown costs about $125 million. House of Cards costs so much money. The shows that Bridgerton probably cost a small fortune. Stranger Things, all these shows that are really what Netflix is known for. And I know we're talking about Apple, but I'm just using them as an example. They cost lots and lots of moolah. It's very expensive. So when you hear about a $25 million film, you're kind of like, ooh, that's a lot. When you look at like a Focus or a Searchlight, they kind of look at that and they're like, we're not going to make that much money off this. That's a really risky decision. But for streaming service, it almost becomes another part of the content. And when they look at the price point, I mean, to kind of go off this just for argument's sake, Netflix bought Passing for $16 million. Passing has no way the amount of accessibility of CODA. Passing's a good movie. It has topics that people are going to love and really discuss, but it does not have the accessibility. CODA, you can get someone will put that movie on, they'll give it a chance, and you know what? They'll probably fall in love with it because it's funny. It's funny. And the characters are charming. Passing is heavy.
It's sweet.
Yeah.
It's very sweet. And I have to talk about Emilia Jones because she's the breakthrough in this movie. She's fantastic. She plays Ruby, the high school girl. And I also have to give a little bit of love to Eugenio Derbez. I believe I'm pronouncing that correct. I believe. Look, he was in Parts Not Included.
Yeah.
That's the movie. And he got
that
you're
talking
movie,
about Instructions Not Included?
Instructions, not Parts. Instructions, forgive me. Instructions Not Included. That movie did so well. And it really elevated, I think, his stature to a degree. And it is a really, it earned everything. It earned all the accolades and the box office that it pulled in. Highest grossing Pantaleone film, I believe. But his performance here, he plays against type, and he's so good. He's like so good in this movie. And, I got to throw him some love because it was a pleasant surprise. Marlee Matlin, it was so comfortable to see her again. And like I said, though, there were so many fresh faces, and it was a fresh, original. It was a romantic comedy. It infused music in this really charming way. And yeah, again, my favorite movie of the year. It's going to take something very special to knock it off for me.
I agree. For me too. I want to just before we segue off of that, I didn't get your take on that. What do you think of the price tag? I mean,
it's expensive. Look, I do think look again. We're in a crazy coming out of 2020. When you're reading the articles about there was a flurry of bids coming in, right? And it was going higher and higher. Those studios you discussed, they just dropped out. Why? Well, you could figure it out. What money do they have? Like, they're not reaping benefits of box office as they normally would have. So 25 million is hefty. I hope Apple does give it the theatrical love, but I think that if a Fox Searchlight or a Focus or even an A24 or something, that's a movie. See, that to me is easily a $50 million grossing movie, because that really would have grown I think the love for it would just be a great wave. I hope Apple recognizes that the really good theatrical experience. And I think coming out of pandemic, we have hope, we have vaccines. And I think this is a perfect example and a perfect movie to try to come out of this, to make us feel good. I don't necessarily want to start seeing pandemic movies, difficult movies. I want to see more CODAs.
Yep.
And I hope it leads the way.
Yeah. And before we jump off of this to go into the final topic, I want to mention the fact that I find this always fascinating every year. And I don't know if anyone ever talks about it. We always talk about the movies that have bidding wars, right? We talk about the CODAs. Oh my God, it broke the record. You know, Palm Springs last year sold for 17.5 million. It was so much money, yada, yada, yada. And yet you have all those other movies that I have on my list here that I read off at the beginning of this segment. There's no price points attached to them. Like, it's like Sony Pictures Classics bought Jockey. Did they?
$2.
And it's like how much did they buy it for? You know, and it's like
$2.
It's probably like so little that like they're not even it's not even worth it, because as much as I like The Father, I mean, The Father is a perfect example of a movie that when you talk about like winning in Steam, yes, it's getting nominations across the board. I mean, I think it's like one that has really like not won anything. Like, it really has just not won anything. And it goes to show you the new power of streamers. And we are going to, and this is not for a conversation today, this will be a conversation we'll have probably next week or the week after, but the battle of the streamers and how everyone wants to have one and how they're not going to all work. They're not, because you can't.
Quibi. Sorry,
Quibi. May you rest in peace. Good luck to you. But yeah, no. But before we end, Demetri, why don't you talk a little bit about the independent film producers, because that kind of ties into Sundance movies and also all film festival movies moving forward.
It does, and it's a fantastic article. It was found. I read it, found it in the Hollywood Reporter. The headline, you can look it up. Indie film producers raise alarm on uncertain futures. A survey was done. So this survey was conducted from an online industry forum called Dear Producers. It found that 77.8% of respondents called for minimum producer fees. So this really isn't good. It's a producer sustainability survey. And when you're talking about minimum producer fees in the indie world today, it wasn't a bad idea for a producer to get into the business and do an indie film. But I always remember a quote from one of the giants in distribution of indie films, Tom Ortenberg, who I had worked with at Lionsgate. And he had a quote about making movies, and it was great. He said, making movies, he goes, it's a gamble. You have no idea. He goes, you know what? You're better off. You got a $50 million budget movie. I'll tell you what, give me 25 million. You keep 25 million. Done. Walk away. Don't make the movie. Like, he goes, that's how difficult it is. And right here, there's a quote from a producer. who responded anonymously, says it's not a career, it's a crapshoot. And today, I think that indie movies, like we talked about earlier, they've taken a hit. They've not been able to blossom because of streaming. So that may have been 20 to 30 years ago, but it's not reflective of the industry today. And now we're talking about producers rarely make a living wage. And how are they getting their monies back for doing the work? And, I know that there's it's called, I believe it's Film Coach, that has a program to ensure that the allocations of monies is going to the right people. But I don't know how you do that today with streaming. They don't report box office.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem. Now last year, around 42% of those surveys reported an income of, catch this, $50,000 or less. $50,000. that and you're a producer.
Yeah.
So we know producers, we've talked to producers. There is a pomp and circumstance. You're in Hollywood. This year, the business prospects, as they pivot to adapt to COVID, it's a challenge this year. I don't want to see indie movies take a hit, but if they're skittish, and then they're talking about even dropping like pay, I don't know how you get film financiers. I don't know how you get these movies done.
Well, I think that ties into, again, we could probably just have a whole conversation about indie cinema, which we should be just taking notes at this point for future shows. Because that's what happened today is pretty much how most of these shows are going to go, where we're going to probably pick like one or two topics and we're just going to really like dive into them.
Right.
And they're going to be ones that are topical to the week based on like what was trending on Twitter or an article or whatnot. But, I think that also ties into the fact that there's too much content. And that there's so much content being produced now more than ever. I think I wrote an article last year and I looked it up, and I think there was like over 900 movies released in 2019. And I mean, even
was that a cross-platform?
What,
Scott, was that cross-platform, like release theatrically and then release streaming as well? Like a combination?
It was literally a combination of streaming, VOD type titles,
great,
and then also theatrical. And I mean, when you talk about a film critic, and a film critic for the most part, the crazy ones will try to watch about 350 to 400 movies a year. The normal ones will probably watch between 2 and 250 a year. But even at the crazy level where you got the 450 up there, you're still missing about half those movies.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. And I think we're putting out way too much content, which we will discuss at another time.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of a problem.
And one more part, going back to this article, many reported increasingly being asked by film financiers to waive or defer all part of upfront producer fees they collect. And again, it's the world we live in. I'm hoping we come out of this.
Yeah.
So, I want there to be a good balance, because we know that the big budgeted films, the franchise pictures, those producers ain't taking a pay cut.
No, they're not.
No,
and Kevin Feige's not taking a pay cut anytime soon.
Whether that movie is going to be on a big screen or whether it's going to be on HBO Max or whatever, he ain't taking a pay cut.
No.
So, I want the producers to reap some benefit. The $25 million, I want to go back to CODA. I'm happy for those creators because they're going to get a little chunk of that. I'm happy for those people. They deserve it. They worked hard. I did some research in the making of that movie. They did a great job. So 25 million, if they get a piece of that pie, I'm happy. But right now, according to this article, that's not the case normally. So I hope things can turn around because I don't want that creative process to go away. I want more movies because it gives us a better time. It gives us more variety and it offsets the franchise pictures. And you never know what the little gem is going to be at the box office.
No, absolutely. All right. Well, that's a good place to end this on this week. We'll be back next week. This is actually pre-taped just so everyone knows because I actually have a junket to do. But next week we're going to go live and actually do this show live and it's going to air right at 11. So we apologize. This is probably going to run around 11:30. But thank you so much for tuning in for this first episode and hope you like it. Also, real quick, Mondays, we're going to be having Pop Council. That is a pop culture show. It's with Wendy Lee Zaney and Jamie Philbrick. You're going to want to check that out if you love pop culture. They're going to be talking about WandaVision probably until it's done. So if you love that show, you're probably going to want to tune into that episode. I also think they're going to be talking about some of that Black Panther news that came out. And then we're also going to launch a horror show next week. It's going to be hosted by the Daily Dead's Heather Wixom. You're going to definitely want to check that one out if you're into the horror genre. Demetri will be making an appearance on there every once in a while, as well as some of our other members. So check that one out. All the shows are going to be running at 11 o'clock. And our goal is to have a new show Monday through Friday airing at 11 o'clock. So, and that's 2 p.m. Eastern time if you're on the East Coast. Thank you again so much for checking out this episode. Please share this video, like this video. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you next week.